Hey, good morning, Horizon Church. Glad to see two of you here, Ann and Pat. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Actually, it looks like three people. I'm not sure. Anyway, so good morning to all of you. I want to talk a little bit about guys who, men and women, not just guys, men and women who are really good at leading through kind of new, I guess you call it new paradigm when things in the world change. You know, Steve Jobs was so famous for that. Steve Jobs was so famous for seeing kind of what nobody else saw and bringing about a new way of kind of functioning in our world. And I read some time ago, actually, I read a book about the Wright brothers and their genius in morning, Mom. Good morning, Estella. Hi, Phyllis. Hi, Patrice. Thank you, Patrice, for including me. So the Wright brothers, their genius. Hi, Kathy, Linda. I had this fascination with flying ever since I was a young kid. Always wanted to fly. And actually got to do a flying lesson as a gift from somebody one time. And it was really cool. Got to take off from the Lehigh Valley International Airport. When we were up in the air, the guy said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I used to live in East Greenville." So we got to fly over East Greenville, went up through Quakertown. Anyway, just a great experience. Harder than you think to do some of that. So one of the things about the Wright brothers is, obviously there's a whole lot that they had to figure out when it comes to getting heavier than aircraft off of the ground. But one of the things that really mystified a whole lot of people, and one of the reasons that I think the Wright brothers were really genius, is they were able to figure something out that nobody else could quite figure out, and that had to do with actually turning. When you're on land, or actually the ocean, when you're on a boat, when you're on land, if you kind of imagine this plane, you really turn on flat surfaces. I guess you call it kind of turning just in two dimensions. A car just turns like this. You want to go right, you go like that, because you're on a flat surface. I think that's like two dimensions. It doesn't work that way when you're flying a plane. Now, I am not an expert, so any of you guys who have pilot's license or who know all this stuff, forgive me if I screw this up. But it doesn't work that way. When you're in a plane, you cannot turn in just two dimensions. You can't turn right to left. And that's one of the things that everybody was struggling with, all the people who were working on flying. And there was a whole bunch of people who are working on flying. And the Wright brothers, they studied birds, and they really were able to think outside the box and figure out that when you're flying, you're no longer kind of flying in just two dimensions on a flat surface, but they figured out that you're really flying kind of in three dimensions. And they eventually determined that you have to turn that way when you're in a plane. You don't turn just side to side, but you actually have to bank to turn. And that was a whole new concept. And they were the guys that figured that out. That may sound simple to us, but when you start to think about the fact that we hadn't flown before, we had dirigibles, things like that, and balloons just went wherever the air took them. But they really had to think about something that humans hadn't done before. And they had to think kind of outside of the box, because the box said, you just turn in two directions. And they had to figure something out that was really interesting. And they did. And in some ways, that was their genius. Their genius was their ability to kind of figure out that something new is required here. We can't think in the old ways because it's not going to work. And that's what everybody was struggling with. We can't think in the old ways. We have to kind of think in a new way. And they did it. They figured out that mystery of turning. And that was part of their success, the Wright brothers. That ability to say there's a new thing going on here, we have to figure it out. It sounds simple to us, but it really was kind of a revolution and a revolutionary way of thinking. And of course, as you know, when you look at the history of aviation, the Wright brothers, gosh, I forget the number of years, but in the lifetime of one person, we went from the Wright brothers taking off and flying just a couple yards on a beach to putting men on the moon. And it's an astonishing accomplishment. Once you unlock, some of the mysteries of a new way of thinking, there's just kind of this explosion. So, I was thinking about and have been thinking about that right now, because obviously in the church, there's something new going on right now, and we're going to have to think about it in a new way. Now, I think that there's going to come a time when, all this kind of COVID stuff will be over. People will be back in church, and we'll look back and talk about these days. But I think there's something new going on in the whole fact that just that what we're doing right now, the fact that we've had to figure out how to communicate with people digitally. And a lot of people we're really struggling with this, because I don't think this is going to change. I mean, there was a time not all that long ago when churches, would broadcast their services. They would put their services on TV. And what you were doing is you were watching a church service. And, somebody would talk about, those of you who are watching out there, and all, obviously there were people who were, do these little commercials and talk about, you can buy this book and blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, the idea was church is taking place in the building and you get to watch. Hi, Kristen. Sorry about that. Hey, Kristen, by the way, I think it's Liam that won this plane. We have one for you. We ordered it. So the next time we see you, let us know that we're going to see you. And Liam's plane is here, because I'm pretty sure he won one of these in bingo. Macy won one too. So I got one for Macy when we finally get out there. Anyway, so in the world of the church, we're no longer just doing church in a building and thinking, well, people are going to watch what we do in a building. This has really changed. And I don't think this is going away anytime soon. In fact, I don't think it should. I think this has really forced the church to say there's a new thing happening here. However, it's going to require us to think about church in a new way. And I think, I'm a believer that I don't understand how God controls history. I'll never understand that. I'm not even sure if I'll get it in heaven. But I don't think God frets over what goes on in the world when something like this pandemic hits, even, all of the riots, things like that. I don't think God says, holy smokes, I never thought it was going to go that way. And so with what's going on in the world of the church, I don't think God has been caught off guard. And I think what we are being forced to do is really a good thing. And we have a lot of churches do. A lot of churches who have been able to do what we've been doing have recognized that they're reaching people that they've never reached before. And people are tuning in. But it raises a lot of questions. Do people who are just watching, who have never been part of Horizon, maybe never been in our building, it really causes the church to say, are they part of Horizon Church? How do we disciple people who are only connecting with us digitally? What's our connection? In some ways, I've heard people in all the response cards, and I think we have like 70 response cards now. I've had people actually say, and some of these are people who have been to our building. I've had people say they have felt more connected to Horizon than ever before. And it is a really interesting phenomenon that we're dealing with. And I think a really big mistake for all of us in the church would be to say, well, let's just kind of get back to normal. I look forward to, this past Sunday, having people in our building, seeing faces, actually hearing people sing. It was very moving to me to actually hear people singing live again. I look forward to that. But I also think we need to recognize that the world has shifted, and this is really a good thing. And if we can figure this out, it's going to require us, in the same way the Wright brothers had to say something new is required. We can't just think about travel in the same way we thought about it in the past, even a simple thing, such a simple thing, how do you turn, required the Wright brothers to think in an entirely different way, and they got it, and that was part of their genius. I think that's what's required for us as a church, to start thinking in a new way, and to start thinking, what does it mean for us if we're able to connect with people that we've never been able to connect with before? What is the nature of the church? It's not going to be the same. Yeah, Estella, I'm glad you have. It's been a long time, Estella, since we were connected down in Red Hill. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just a good example. The fact that even digitally, we're able to build connections and build relationships. And I don't think this is going away. In fact, I think it'd be a shame if the church just said, well, let's just get back to normal. We have to figure out how to do this. And it's going to require us to think in new ways. And, I don't know. I don't know who all, is out there engaging in this, but I'm really hoping that there are a few people that are willing to say, I really love this. And I think it's important. People who will help us as a church to say, how do we navigate in this new world? What does it look like? Jesus there's an episode once where some of the religious leaders, again, Jesus did this. And I think this was the genius. There's more to Jesus than just his genius. But I think one of the things about Jesus is that he understood that something new is going on. His condemnation of the temple, for example, when he was, hi, Andrea. I agree, Andrea, and that's the key, but Jesus had this thing where he understood that there was something new happening, and he knew what it was, and he was able to navigate it. And that's one of the issues that was so difficult for the religious leaders of his day. And there's that great story where they came to Jesus and they said to him, why aren't your disciples obeying all of the rules like we did? They talk specifically about the cleanliness laws. And Jesus, in part of his answer, he said, you can't pour new wine into old wineskins. And it's a brilliant answer in which he was saying there's something new going on here. And the old platforms aren't adequate. And that really messed with some of the religious leaders, their minds. I think that's where we are. And I think it's going to be tough for us to navigate. And I really hope there's some people out there who are willing to say, I want to help with this and figure this out. For me, I love doing this. I love the ability we have to kind of expand our outreach, but we need help with it. First of all, my plate's pretty full, and trying to figure out new stuff at this point is a really difficult thing. And a lot of you have really full plates too. I know that. Think of Andrea and Kristen and parents, and how full your plates are, because you guys are navigating a new world as well. This new world of what is school going to look like, and things like that. Especially those of you who are parents and teachers and trying to hold down jobs. But anyway, all that to say, I'll never forget. Back to the. Thanks, Andrea. Appreciate it. I think back what I was talking about in the beginning. For us, it is so simple. It's just so simple. We see a plane, and he banks, and it turns. But that simple thing required two very brilliant guys to think differently and to realize that a plane is not just a car in the sky, and it doesn't just turn in two dimensions. And that changed everything when those guys figured that out. So that's where we are as a church. And just the fact they're even just doing this, I think is proof of the fact that the church world has changed. And that's a good thing. We really get to as a church to expand our reach. There are people that we're communicating with that we've never communicated with before, people engaging. But it does make us ask the question, what does this mean? What is church going to look like? And how do we function? Pat, that's another great verse from Isaiah. It's such a good thing. Isaiah says, do you see it? I think some of us see it, but figuring out what it looks like and how do we do it is a difficult thing altogether. I do believe God's going to lead us. I believe that God's Spirit is in this. From my perspective, just looking at Horizon, not even what was going on in the church world, but just looking at Horizon, I'm 100% sure that God was preparing us for this. He saw it even when we didn't. And I think, Kathy, you're such a people person too, such a big heart for people. A lot of people need the face-to-face, and I agree. So let me pray for all of us, and then we'll get on with our days. God, I want to thank you for the fact that you really are in charge of our world. Understanding what that looks like is always going to be difficult for us. But God, I believe that there's nothing that is going to surprise you in our world. Nothing about human beings, nothing about the course of history that catches you off guard. God, I'm confident that even in the midst of what we're going through right now, that through your Spirit, you have not abandoned your church, but that you've actually been in the process of guiding us and showing us where to go. And I'm so grateful, God, that we can count on you to do that. God, I do want to pray that you'd give us some sense of direction to help us to know what the church is going to look like, and what it means to be the church in an age when we're connecting in such different ways. God, I also want to pray that when I think about connections, I pray that you'd help us to be people who just truly love connecting with other human beings, however we do that. I pray for God for people. I know that there are many people who are really, really struggling because of the absence of human connection, just being able to see a person's face, being able to be with friends, able to have play dates with our kids, able to take our kids to the zoo. So much of that, God, is missing, and it's difficult, and a lot of people are really struggling. God, please give us, through your Spirit, give us the ability to persevere, give us courage in the face of some of the fear-driven stuff that we hear constantly. God, give us wisdom, and I pray, God, also that you'd fill us with your Spirit and enable us to see what we need to see as a church and as people of the church. Thanks, God, for your goodness to us. I pray, God, that you bless the men and women who are engaged in listening. Thank you, God, for everybody from Horizon who's plugged in. And I pray your blessing on them. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty, everybody. Love you all, and hope you have a good day.